Block.
Right. And we're basing this entirely on your sources. We've got an overview doc, the full terms of service, some detailed documentation, and their FAQ section.
Exactly. And these documents, they frame OpenPlaza as a kind of digital gold mine, don't they? Where digital art meets blockchain tech.
They do use that phrase. So our mission here is really to unpack everything these specific documents tell us. Now, how does it really work according to them? What are the rules you absolutely need to know?
Yeah, what are the costs? What are the catches?
Precisely. And what are the big takeaways, maybe even pitfalls that the sources themselves point out? We're sticking only to what's in this material.
Okay, no outside opinions, just the documents. So let's see if we can figure out how to strike digital gold here, or maybe just, understand the map they've laid out.
Good way to put it.
So first things first, what do these sources say OpenPlaza is? Like its core identity on Apertum?
Well, right away, they call it the premier NFT marketplace on the Apertum Blockchain.
Good.
That's the label they give it.
Premier, okay.
And they really emphasize it being a, quote, secure, decentralized environment. That's a vibe they're going for, built for digital art and using blockchain tech.
Secure, decentralized. Got it. And the main things you actually do there, what's the purpose?
Fundamentally, it boils down to three things mentioned across the sources. Discovering NFTs, finding ones already out there,
Hmm.
minting NFTs, creating your own,
Yeah.
and trading them, buying and selling.
Discover, mint, trade. Simple enough.
Yeah, they present it as the main hub on Apertum for all that.
Okay, finding, creating, exchanging. Now, the documents seem to break down that creation part, the minting, into like three pretty clear steps.
Yeah, they lay it out quite simply. Step one, create your collection. Think of this as setting up your personal gallery or storefront on OpenPlaza.
Okay, like a profile.
Sort of.
Yeah.
And the key requirement here, according to the locks, is you need 10 APTM tokens.
Ah.
Or you need to already own an existing collection on their platform. But for newcomers, it's that 10 APTM fee to get started with a fresh collection.
10 APTM just to set up shop. That's a barrier to entry right there. Small, maybe, but it's there. All right, collection created. Step two.
Step two is the actual minting. This is where you upload your digital file. The sources say they support things like JPG, PNG, GIF for images, MP3, MP4 for audio video.
The standard formats.
Pretty standard. And crucially, this is where you set your creator royalties.
Ah, the royalties. What do the docs say about those?
They specify a range from 0% all the way up to 50%. That's for any future secondary sales of that NFT. You decide that percentage when you mint.
0 to 50%. That's a huge range.
It is. Then, once you've set that, you mint the token onto the Apertum Blockchain.
Okay, so the token, the NFT itself, lives on the Apertum chain. But what about the actual artwork? The image file, the video file, where does that go, according to these sources?
Right, that's a really important detail they include. The actual digital asset file isn't stored on the blockchain. The documents say it's uploaded to IPFS storage.
IPFS, Interplanetary File System.
Exactly. So the NFT on the blockchain is essentially a pointer or a reference to that file stored on IPFS. They make that distinction clear.
Okay, so token on chain, file on IPFS. Got it. That's key. And step three.
Step three is basically just using the marketplace. Trading. Once your NFT is minted, or if you've bought one, you can list it for sale. You set your price in APTM.
And you can browse and buy from others too, obviously.
Yep. Browse, discover, make offers, buy. That's the trading aspect.
Seems straightforward enough on paper, but, before you could even click any buttons, there are some fundamental requirements,
Mhm.
especially around wallets, right? The sources really stress this part.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the warnings get very, very clear in the documentation and the TOS. You have to connect a compatible Web3 wallet. They mention MetaMask as an example. That's your gateway.
No other way in.
No other way in. And then comes the big disclaimer. You, the user, are solely and entirely responsible for securing your wallet. That means your private keys, your seed phrases.
Wow. Solely and entirely responsible. They don't mince words, do they?
Not at all. They state very explicitly that OpenPlaza does not store your keys. They don't have access to them. They can't see them.
So if you lose your keys...
You're out of luck.
Yeah.
They emphasize OpenPlaza cannot recover your wallet or your funds if your keys are lost or compromised. There's no password reset, no support ticket that gets your assets back.
That shifts all the security burden onto the user, right there in black and white in the sources. Any other basic requirements to use the platform?
Yep, you have to be at least 18 years old. Standard stuff.
Okay.
And since it's all happening on the Apertum network, you absolutely need APTM tokens
Right, the native currency. What for?
for pretty much everything. You need APTM for
Yeah.
transaction fees.
Yeah.
gas fees paid to the network validators.
Hmm.
You need it for that 10 APTM cost to create a new collection like we mentioned. And you need it to cover the gas costs when you mint NFTs. The docs even helpfully provide the Apertum network details. Chain ID is 2786. Currency symbol is APTM.
Okay, so recap. Get the right wallet, guard those keys with your life, be 18 plus AJA, and have APTM ready for fees. That's the entry ticket. Now, what about the rules inside the plaza? What kind of stuff is not allowed based on these documents?
The terms of service are pretty specific here. They list categories of prohibited content for NFTs.
Like what?
Well, anything illegal, obviously. Anything harmful or offensive.
Yeah.
Big one, copyrighted material that you don't have permission to use.
Under the rights issue.
Exactly. They also forbid content violating any third-party rights, could be trademarks, privacy, etc. Malware or malicious code is a definite no-no.
Makes sense. What about adult content?
They mention explicit material is prohibited unless it has appropriate warnings, but, the general rule against offensive content might still catch a lot of things there. It's a bit vague.
So creators need to be careful about rights and the nature of the content. What about behavior? Any rules on how users should act on the marketplace?
Yes, the docs also cover prohibited conduct. Things like market manipulation are banned.
Like pumping prices.
Yeah, or wash trading, which they define as basically trading an asset back and forth with yourself to fake volume or price increases.
Mm-hmm.
Any kind of fraudulent activity is forbidden too. They're trying to keep the market activity somewhat fair, or at least appear fair.
And if someone breaks these rules, content or conduct?
The documents say violations may lead to consequences like having the content removed or your account suspended, the usual platform moderation tool.
May result in. Okay. Now let's shift to something often tricky in NFTs, intellectual property. According to these OpenPlaza documents, what do you actually own?
This is super important, and the sources do try to clarify it. They state that when you mint something, you retain the ownership of your original content. Minting is essentially you asserting you have the rights to that digital creation.
Okay, so the creator owns their original work. But what about the person who buys the NFT later?
That's the crucial distinction they make. Buying an NFT on OpenPlaza, according to these sources, gives you ownership of the blockchain token itself, the unique digital certificate on the chain.
But not necessarily the copyright or other IP rights to the artwork itself.
Exactly. The documents emphasize that buying the token does not automatically transfer the underlying intellectual property rights.
So if I buy, say, a cool digital painting NFT, I own that specific token ID on Apertum. But based on these docs, I don't suddenly own the copyright that would let me sell prints or use it commercially.
That's precisely the point the sources make. You own the token, which might come with certain limited display rights or whatever the creator intended, but full IP ownership isn't the default. They also mention OpenPlaza respects IP and has a process for DMCA takedown notices for infringing content.
That's a really critical takeaway from their own terms, knowing what you're actually buying. Okay, let's talk money. Fees, costs. What do the documents lay out?
They're pretty upfront about the fee structure. 3 main costs to be aware of. First, the platform fee. OpenPlaza takes a 2.5% cut on all sales that happen on their marketplace.
2.5%.
Okay.
Goes to OpenPlaza. What about the original artist?
That's the second cost. Creator royalties. We mentioned creators can set this when minting, anywhere from 0% to 50%.
Right.
So if an NFT sells on the secondary market and the creator set, say, a 10% royalty, then 10% of that sale price automatically goes back to the creator's wallet.
Gotcha. So platform fee, potential creator royalty. What's the third piece?
Gas fees. These aren't paid to OpenPlaza at all. They go directly to the Apertum network operators, the validators for processing and securing your transaction on the blockchain.
And those vary, right?
Yeah, gas fees fluctuate depending on how busy the Apertum network is at that moment. Standard blockchain stuff.
So any transaction buying, selling, maybe even listing could involve that 2.5% platform fee, a creator royalty, and a network gas fee. Do they tell you this up front?
The sources state that all applicable fees are clearly shown to you before you confirm any transaction, so you should see the breakdown.
And once you click confirm.
It's done. The docs also state that fees are non-refundable once the transaction is confirmed on the blockchain.
Yeah.
It ties back to that whole blockchain irreversibility thing.
Yeah, that irreversibility keeps coming up. And speaking of things the sources really want you to understand, they have some pretty major disclaimers, right, about the service itself and the NFTs.
Oh, yes. This is lawyer speak, but it's important. The documents state the OpenPlaza service is provided as IS.
Meaning,
meaning without any warranties.
yep.
They specifically disclaim warranties of merchantability or fitness for a particular purpose. Basically, use it at your own risk. They're not guaranteeing it'll work perfectly or suit your needs. They also limit their liability. They say they're not responsible for indirect damages or, significantly, for failures of the underlying Apertum blockchain network itself.
As limited liability, standard legal protection for platforms. But there was another disclaimer that seemed much more direct about the NFTs themselves.
Yes. And this one is stark. It's often in all caps in the documents. These NFTs are not investments.
Whoa, okay. For a platform potentially seen as a place to make money, calling itself a digital gold mine, that's blunt, not investments.
Extremely blunt. And they follow it right up by stating that NFT values are speculative. They say values can go down, potentially to zero. They might become worthless.
So they're directly warning users not to treat buying NFTs on their platform as a reliable financial investment strategy.
That's exactly what the documents convey. It's a strong warning about the speculative nature of these assets.
And this ties into that interesting bit the sources include about regulation, mentioning an SEC commissioner.
It does. Yeah, the terms of service actually reference a statement by SEC Commissioner Hester Pierce from May 19th, 2025. The document highlights her view that many NFTs, especially ones structured with creator royalties like those on OpenPlaza, are not considered securities under current SEC interpretation.
Interesting. And what's the implication OpenPlaza draws from that in their documents?
They suggest that this interpretation means marketplaces like theirs might not be subject to the same heavy regulations as, say, traditional stock exchanges. The reasoning offered is that these NFTs typically don't grant buyers the kind of economic rights, like a share of profits or voting rights, in a company that usually define a security.
That's fascinating context drawn directly from the sources linking the not investments warning to a potential regulatory difference. Okay, quickly then, what about privacy? What do the docs say they do with user info?
The privacy section mentions they collect minimal personal info, just what's needed for the service. They do point out the obvious. Your wallet address and transaction history are public on the blockchain anyway.
Right, that's inherent.
They say they collect some anonymized usage analytics to improve the platform, and importantly, they state they do not sell your personal information.
And the really critical stuff, like keys.
They reiterate
Blah.
they never collect private keys or wallet passwords. That stays with you.
Good. Okay, nearly there.
Mm.
Finally, the terms of service document itself. What's the main message about agreeing to it?
The core point is unavoidable. Using OpenPlaza means you agreed to their terms of service. It's a legally binding contract.
No clicking, I agree, without reading, ideally.
Ideally. They also mentioned the terms can be updated, and if you keep using the platform after updates, you're agreeing to the new terms.
And what about ending the agreement? Can they kick you off?
Yes, they reserve the right to terminate your access. But, and this is key again, termination cannot reverse blockchain transactions. Assets minted or traded on the blockchain remain there, controlled by the wallets that hold them, regardless of your account status on the OpenPlaza website itself.
Right. The on-chain reality is separate from the platform's interface layer. Makes sense. And if users need help, what support resources do the documents point to?
Pretty standard stuff listed.
Hmm.
There's an FAQ page, more detailed documentation, a support center for submitting tickets, and they mention a community, specifically highlighting Discord as a place to connect.
Okay. Wow, we've definitely extracted a lot from your source documents about OpenPlaza. Let's try to boil this down. What are the absolute must-know takeaways from this deep dive based purely on this material?
All right, based only on these sources, OpenPlaza positions itself as the top NFT spot on Apertum for digital art. It has a clear process for creating and trading. It has defined rules on content and behavior. And critically, it comes with some very significant warnings and disclaimers.
And the absolute core points, the things you cannot ignore if you use it, according to them.
Number one, your wallet security is 100% on you. Lose your keys, lose your assets, OpenPlaza can't help.
Got it. What else?
Fees are involved. There's the 2.5% platform cut on sales, plus potential creator royalties from 0.50% and Apertum network gas fees. All non-refundable once confirmed.
Okay. Fees?
Transactions on the blockchain are final, irreversible,
Reversible.
and maybe the biggest one. The documents explicitly state NFTs on their platform are not investments. Their value is speculative and could drop to zero.
Not investments. Wow. That really paints the picture straight from their own materials. It sounds like while they might use marketing like digital goldmine, the documentation puts almost all the risk and responsibility squarely on the user.
It really does. And what's kind of fascinating, stepping back and looking at the sources overall, is that juxtaposition. They're talking
Yeah.
about secure, decentralized environment.
Yeah.
And in the same breath, they deliver these stark warnings. Irreversible transactions, no recovery for lost keys, assets might become worthless.
It's like security means two different things there. Security of the network's ledger versus security for the individual user's potential mistakes or losses.
Exactly. And that leaves us with a final thought, really a question for you to ponder based on what these specific sources reveal. This platform's version of security clearly prioritizes the blockchain's integrity and transaction finality. But what risks does that model inherently shift onto you, the user, compared to more traditional online systems where maybe you'd have account recovery options or customer service intervention or even the possibility of reversing a fraudulent transaction?
That's a really pertinent question to consider. What kind of security are you actually getting, and what kind are you giving up? Definitely something to think about. Thanks for digging through these sources with us today.